Lectures are continuing online at Wits University. Despite a protest on campus earlier, the protesting students disrupted traffic on both Empire and Yale roads. The routes have since been cleared. Now, demands include that all students owing 150,000 rands or less be allowed to register. The SRC also wants a 10,000 rand upfront fee for Wits residents be waived and the 45,000 rands a cap for residents to be scrapped. Right, of course, this is a developing story. Now let's get an update. We're now joined via Zoom by Wits University spokesperson Shirona Patel. Shirona, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I mean, have these protests caught you off guard as Wits? One would imagine, especially during this time of the year, negotiations with the SRC would have already taken place.
Yes, so in fact, for the last few weeks, we've been in partnership with the SRC, trying to fundraise collectively to support students. So I think that, we've worked over the past few weeks to register as many students as possible. So that would be, where we are at this point. We did have a group of, say, about 150 students or so this morning. It dwindled down to about 70, and they've since dispersed. I must just correct that classes are not online. Classes continue today. We had 2 classes which were disrupted, but the minute the protesters left, the student, the lessons continued. So the academic program is continuing both in person and online today. As far as the funding is concerned, we give 150 million rand in scholarships and bursaries from Wits' council funds for students. In addition, this year, together with the SRC, we put aside 28 million rand, which we fundraised for. This is for the Wits Hardship Fund, and this is to assist students in need. We help them with up to 50% of their historic debt, and we give them, it allows us to pay for their emergency accommodation for at least a few weeks or a month until they can get settled. So on 2 of the demands that the SRC has put forward, first in terms of accommodation, we've secured 350 beds. And as we find students in need, they've been placed in that accommodation. So that's the first. And then the second is in terms of the hardship fund. We still have funding in the hardship fund, as well as what the SRCs raised. They raised 6 million rand from donors. We matched that with another 6 million. So essentially, there's 40 million rand available for students who require funding. Up until around 6 o'clock last night, our officials from the Dean of Student Affairs office was in conversation with the SRC, and we were, processing applications for hardship funding. And then suddenly overnight, we just saw these protests this morning. Where we are at now is that classes continue today. Like I said, we had only 2 that were disrupted in the commerce and in science, but they thereafter. And the students have since dispersed. I've just come from a walk on our campus. They walked through to Parktown, walked back, and dispersed about half an hour ago.
So where then do you think that the friction is between the SRC and management? I mean, you now have essentially between yourselves and the SRC managed to raise over 12 million rands, which is in the kitty, so to speak, for students who qualify. Where do you think it all went wrong, particularly because you are sharing, some of the interventions that Wits has made in terms of raising those funding, particularly for those students who are hard done by and they don't have accommodation or shelter?
So it's 40 million rand in the kitty, not 12 million rand. I think where we're coming unstuck perhaps is on what we agreed to up front, which was students who qualify academically to be at Wits. So what the students are now demanding is that all students be registered regardless of their historical debt. We put a cap on it and we said, we'll give you 50% of what's owed. And I think that's where it's come unstuck a little bit. Also, students accumulate historic debt over time if they're not passing. So what happens is if you have NSFAS funding and you don't pass for 2 years, NSFAS then withdraws that funding. This means you accumulate debt over year 1, year 2, and you're now in year 3, and then you change a course, for example, and then you register again, you fail again, and so you don't have NSFAS funding, you're accumulating all this debt, and now you want to be let in. And we're saying we should rather reserve those spots for students who are academically qualifying, who are passing, and they should be the ones who are kind of receiving the funding. And I think that's where there's a difference of opinion at this stage.
So you are saying, that there was minimal disruption in a sense of 2 classrooms, and that, classes are resuming. Do you think that the status quo will remain the same? Does the university have a contingency plan in place should things escalate tomorrow?
Yes, so we are hopeful, and at this stage we will continue with academic classes, both in person and online. So that's the first. The second is we have brought in some additional security to just safeguard academic lectures so that students who want to learn and who want to be in those classrooms can do so. We've also brought on security for staff and students so that they can enter and exit the university without any issue. So that's the second. But aside from all of that, I think the more important thing is the engagement with students. And both our Dean of Students, our Vice Chancellor and others have have said that they're open to speaking with the students when they're ready to do so. And I think that, issues like this can only be resolved through engagement, and in no other way. And we're hopeful to go that route.
I appreciate that, the university has a plan in place, as you've alluded to. But it seems that financial exclusion is a fundamental matter that has been historic and ongoing for many years now, especially affecting universities in Johannesburg, major universities. What are some of the discussions that are taking place at a higher level to, once and for all, kind of mitigate this from being a recurrence every single year?
Yep. So I think it is a national conversation. You're absolutely right. It's a national conversation between universities in South Africa, between Universities South Africa, which is a body which represents all the 26 public universities in the country, between government and the private sector. I have to say that the private sector this time around has come to the party. They've put in some of the funding. They have offered us emergency beds for students. So we've got 350 beds that can accommodate students who may be sleeping in libraries or labs. And as we find them, we're asking our security to help us to move them into this emergency accommodation. So I can say the private sector's come to the party. Where we're battling, and we objected to this, for example, is when NSFAS has now put a cap of 45,000 Rand per annum on accommodation for students who are on NSFAS funding. Wits has agreed this year with the SRC that we will kind of to buffer that gap. The private service accommodators, accommodation service providers around Wits have also agreed to the 45,000 Rand for the year. We have objected to this by USAF. We have objected to this directly with the department, but this is kind of where we fall short. For this year, we've spoken to the service providers and asked them to absorb the costs to which they've agreed. But this is an ongoing conversation. We have to solve these issues at a national level so that we don't have these recurring issues year on year.
Shirona, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. A pleasure speaking to you. Shirona Patel is the spokesperson at Wits University.